As you know, we had a couple of seats for the Frank Sinatra concert in Chicago that we gave away on the air last weekend. The gentleman that's opening up for Frank Sinatra is on the line right now. Tom Dreesen, how are you?
I'm fine, Ken. How you doing?
Real good. This is an excellent opportunity to talk with you again. We did it some time ago, but golly, you got to be really on your toes for Sinatra, don't you?
Well, I don't know. I think not necessarily for him. You have to be on your toes anytime you're doing stand-up comedy, but it's.
Let me put it this way: you've been around forever. I know you've gotten comments from Jack Benny when he was still around, some compliments. You're one of those up-and-coming people that have been at it forever, and
yeah.
And really, now that you're working with Sinatra, though, are you a little nervous? I mean, just from what we've heard about Sinatra.
Well, I tell you, somebody was just asking me that just a few moments ago, and yes and no. I trained for many years in comedy. I trained in the littlest, smallest clubs with 2-3 people in the audience at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and worked in the bars and the saloons. And I worked my way up to the Playboy circuit, to working Mr. Kelly's, to finally working in Las Vegas 2 years with Sammy Davis. And I toured the country with Sammy. I toured the country with Mac Davis, with Tony Orlando. I started doing coliseums and state fairs. And before long, I was getting trained in this business of stand-up comedy. So when I went to work with Frank Sinatra, I was ready. I was prepared, and I was ready. So I'm not a nervous performer to begin with. I don't get all excited before a show. I'm very relaxed.
But here he is, the chairman of the board.
Well, that part, I'll tell you, Ken, I'll tell you the truth. Oftentimes, I've gone on tour with Mr. Sinatra. We've done 20 cities already. And I'll go perform with him, and he'll joke and clown around with me before the show, and then I'll watch him sing, and then afterward we'll go have a bite to eat sometimes, and we'll talk and talk about nuclear war, and we'll talk about hugging your son, and we'll talk about how he first met Dean, and we'll talk about boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple days later, I'm on a plane, and I'm flying along about 37,000 feet on my way back to L.A., and all of a sudden, out of the blue, it hits me. I've just been with Frank Sinatra, and he calls me Tommy, and these kind of things. Believe me, that's how it hits me.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I remember being a bartender and hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox that I worked at. And I remember when I was a kid shining shoes in taverns in West Harvey, and Frank Sinatra was on the jukebox there, and you'd hear him singing, and he was a major star then, And now I'm his opening act, and that's when it overcomes me at the oddest times, Not when I'm with him, but at the oddest times.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to make you any smaller name than you are, certainly, because you've paid your dues. You've been around, as you said. You started out at the Comedy Store, and it was a long, hard road to hoe for a while, wasn't it?
That was the second time around. I started out the first time with a comedy team, Tim Reed, who, as you know,
oh yeah,
Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati, and then he's now on a show called Simon and Simon. Now, we paid dues, and we struggled. We worked all kinds of clubs. We worked all black clubs, what they affectionately call the Chitlin Circuit, where we worked black-owned, black-operated nightclubs in Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, all over the United States, and New York and Atlantic City. And then we paid our dues. And then after 6 years of that struggle, Tim decided he wanted to go it alone, and I had to start all over again. That's when I went as a single to the West Coast, and I started doing stand-up comedy at the Comedy Store for a few years, and then the improvisation and the horn, and eventually they saw me, the Tonight Show saw me, and then my career took me from there to the bigger rooms, to what they, in our business, refer to as the big time, Las Vegas.
Or like the Airy Crown.
Yeah, the Airy Crown. Anytime you work those, the Airy Crown, the Mill Run Theaters, the Holiday Star, those with big acts, you're in the big time now.
Yeah. How would you describe yourself, Tom, as a comedian? You're a stand-up, obviously, but you tend to go in certain areas. I know you talk about the schooling that you had as a youngster.
I'm a monologist. There's slapstick comics, and there's comics who do props and tricks and things like that, gimmicks. I'm a monologist. And a monologist is just someone who does monologues. I'm a storyteller, and I do one-liners sometimes, but I mix them all. I think basically my Irish background makes me that of a storyteller. I think the Irish side of my family had great storytellers, and I think that's where that part came from. I also had on the Italian side, my godfather, Frank Polizzi, was a wonderful, wonderful joke teller. He was my uncle and my godfather, and he was an incredible joke teller, storyteller. He did dialects. So I kind of fall in that vein.
So it comes by you naturally.
Well, yes, I really believe that comedians that stay in the business any length of time it has to be a natural gift, to make people laugh. There's 270 million people in the United States and Canada. There's only 180 stand-up comedians who make a living at it.
And it is so tough. I think one of the hardest things to do is to go make other people laugh, especially when you're having a miserable time of it, maybe trying to drive a cab and do about 14 other jobs to make ends meet.
Well, it's tough. That's why, because it's a natural gift. Ever since I was a little boy, I could make people laugh. I liked making people laugh. It wasn't a neurotic need. It's just that I enjoyed making people laugh. I once wrote a poem called The Sound of Laughter, and someday I'll do it for you. But the first line is, as far back as I could remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what drives me. I like hearing people laugh.
You never have a nightmare thinking, I've lost my sense of humor, have you? Or something just doesn't strike you as being funny one particular time?
Oh, sometimes I think most comics fear that, I write almost all my own material, and I've had to do 350-something television shows coming up with new material all the time, 45 Johnny Carson shows where they want a brand new 5 minutes every time. You some nights wake up in the middle of the night and say, my God, I can't think of one more funny thing.
Yeah.
But...
and is it really going to be funny? Until you get in front of a live audience, you don't know.
Absolutely. I have written things and run in the other room and said to my wife, wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear this. This will knock your socks off. And she would stare at me and say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I'd go on stage that night and get screams with it. And the other nights I'd go in and say, look, I got something real funny, and I'd try it, and it wouldn't get a laugh at all.
Yeah, so you quick go on to something else then.
Well, yeah, of course. But that's why we use the Comedy Store and the improvisation. No matter how long I've been in the business, I'll always drop in there and do a new 5 minutes to get up and break in new material,
Yeah, and of course it depends on the night. Some nights it's better than others, I suppose.
I like to think that it's like sex. Yeah, some nights it's better than others. It's never really bad, but some nights it's better than others.
How does it work for Sinatra, though? Here you are. I'm trying to picture that. I think Jerry Van Dyke maybe said it. Here you are opening up an act for somebody that didn't even come to see you. That's a tough position to be in. Probably everybody that goes there is going to be ready to see Sinatra, and you got to break them in, don't you? You got to get them in a good mood.
Well, that's true, and I'll tell you, in my particular case, let me give you this scenario. In the Coliseums, at the Erie Crown, there's only 4,000 or 5,000 people a night, but we normally work one-nighters at places like Chicago Stadium, where they hold 20,000 people. Now, this is the way it is. Buddy Rich goes out and does 25 minutes. Then they take a 15-minute intermission, and then all the lights go down low, and the audience goes, ooh. And then the orchestra strikes up New York, New York.
Yeah.
Ba-da-dum-ba, and everybody goes, yay! And then they introduce me. And 20,000 people... 20,000 people bitch and moan as I head for the stage. But they...
you got to whip in a chair, don't you, when you go out there?
You know what I do? I go out and joke about it. I just say things like, how many of you thought Frank Sinatra was coming out? And they all applaud. And I say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself. and I like the challenge. And before I leave, I usually get them and they're really excited. And as I'm taking my bows, Mr. Sinatra enters the stage while I'm still on stage. So it's a very exciting moment for me.
It has to give you a good high when you get an audience on your side.
Yeah.
Nothing worse than flop sweat, though, I suppose.
No, see, flop sweat, best described is when you're out there and you're not getting any laughs, and all of a sudden you feel perspiration under your arm, and it's all of a sudden rolling down your side, and it's very cold. That's when you know you're not doing too good. I never sweat, Ken. I never have liked comedians who sweat. Jack Benny was one of my favorite comedians. I liked his effortless style.
Mm-hmm.
So I never sweat on stage. If you see me sweating, I'm dying like a dog. When I start sweating, that means I'm not doing too hot out there.
How has Frank been entertaining in Chicago? It's through the weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, Tuesday. We opened last night, and we closed Saturday night.
Every night, I hope, is going to be a real winner, because some of these seats are going for a premium. I heard one seat's like $1,500, perhaps?
Oh, I can't believe it. Is that so? That must be a charity thing. Sometimes people do charities, and then they raffle something off.
That could have been. Maybe that was one ticket up to that price.
Yeah. If you're a fan of Frank Sinatra's or not, I think you owe it to yourself to see him if he's coming through your town. He's 68 years old. He's been a major star for over 40 years. Whether you like Frank Sinatra or not, I think you owe it to yourself for one reason. In your lifetime, you're likely never to see a living legend. And Frank Sinatra is truly a living legend in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
Again, I know some people out there may love him, and some people may not. They say, I don't care for his music. That's not important. I'm talking about a living legend, and like I say, in your lifetime, you're lucky if once in your lifetime you'll be able to see someone like him.
Well, it's certainly a feather in your cap to be working the same show, Tom, and I think you're very funny. I know you got a career that's been going a long time. What do they say? The average comedian nowadays has only had, 6 years probably in front of the national limelight, and then that's about it. You've gone way beyond that.
Well, they're lucky if they last that long. The public tires of you. I have never really been the hottest comic in the country at all. I've been lucky. I've done a lot of television, a lot of Vegas and Tahoe places, but my career, I like to think of it as building a house where I put together one brick at a time. I've known comedians, friends of mine, who shot to the top. Robin Williams was my opening act. He did 12 minutes in front of me when I was a headliner at a comedy club. Less than a year later, he was a major star. I knew Freddie Prinze when he first started out. He was here in Chicago with me. He went to my house for Thanksgiving dinner. No one knew of him. No one ever heard of him. And I couldn't get him on a show, Ken. I couldn't get him on a radio show. Finally, Ed Schwartz from WIND put him on just one night. It was the only one that would put this kid on. And within 4 months, he was on the cover of every magazine and had his own series.
Wow.
With 4 months from the day that I could not get him on any show in Chicago. So I'm saying my career has never rocketed like that. It's just been one brick at a time. But I have a theory that when the house finally gets built, the first wind that comes along won't blow it down.
Yeah, not a flash in the pan by any means.
I hope not. I enjoy my work, and also it's important for you to diversify. I'm not only a stand-up comedian. I studied acting, and I'll be doing some movies later on this year, as well as I host shows. I host talk shows sometimes, and so I like to do that. And I like to play softball, and I like to jog, and I like to play golf, and I like to do other things in life.
And you probably like to sleep, so we'll let you go before you have to go on tonight. I know you were at the ballpark this afternoon.
Yeah. Very sad thing happened. Tommy Lasorda was going to throw 5 pitches to me. And if I got one hit, if I didn't get a hit, I had to perform at his favorite charity.
Yeah.
And if I did get a hit, he would perform at my charity, which is multiple sclerosis, in honor of my sister.
What happened?
And Tommy, I didn't realize how good he was. He warmed up, and then all of a sudden he started throwing fastballs. At first he brushed me back on the first pitch. Then he threw 2 fastballs, and then he threw 2 breaking curves that I'm telling you really broke. And I ended up hitting the ball twice, once back to him and once to the right side, but I didn't get a hit. So now I have to do his favorite charity here in Chicago, November 10th, which is the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame.
Well, it's still a worthy cause, huh?
Yeah, it's always, anytime. But Tommy's a good sport, and I'm glad to help him out any way I can.
Yeah. Tom, nice to talk to you, and all the best.
My best to you, Ken.